delay. So stop your waiting.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for another episode of the Fox 12 Weather Podcast. This is episode 63. Today is Thursday, August 3rd. I'm meteorologist Jeff Orgeron, joined by meteorologist Katie Suniga. Hey Katie.
Hello, caught me at home today.
Yeah, and joined by Camila Ortiz as well in studio. Hey Camila.
Yes, hello Jeff and Katie.
And if you're curious where I'm recording from, I'm in my basement per usual. This is kind of like my little weather zone, my little man cave here. And it allows me to do it from home. So, yeah, guys, we have officially wrapped up the month of July. We have a lot to go over in terms of stats and how things played out. And we'll obviously get into things in August, what the typical expectations are, how things have played out so far, what we're seeing in the forecast. We have a weather term of the week that we'll be talking about later on. And if we have some time, we would also like to give you updates on how things are going in the gardens and maybe ask Camila what kind of races she has coming up, because I'm sure she has something scheduled.
I thought you were going to say ask Camila what new plant in her yard she's allowed to die.
We're not allowing you to dye anything if that's the way you want to say it. So I actually, really quickly, I did mention like a few weeks back that I had a tomato starter that I wanted to give you. I've been nursing it out front. Now that it's August, though, it's almost pointless because a lot of us are starting to harvest.
Yeah.
So we'll maybe hold off until next year. I'm not going to give you that same one next year, though. It'll probably be toast by that point.
I'm just waiting for some like vegetables or something. Like I haven't had anything brought to me here in the weather center yet.
Well,
Katie
and
has
that
a
was
smirk.
my fault.
Katie has a smirk on her face.
I had cucumbers sitting on my counter waiting to bring her yesterday, and I just walked out the door, and as soon as I saw her face in the weather center, the cucumbers popped in my head. I was so disappointed. So now they're sitting there, and I'm not going to see her till next Wednesday, so they will probably be eaten by then.
Yeah, and Jeff, I even brought her a peach. I brought her a fresh peach from a peach farm.
Did.
Spoiler alert.
Epic fail.
Spoiler alert, I might have some things to share because the harvest is growing over here.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll talk about that toward the end. Let's go over some things that went on in July. July came in as the warmest month on record globally. That's official. And so there were multiple heat domes building, which are strong areas of high pressure that build up in the mid to upper levels of the atmosphere and bring sinking air. And they don't move very much. So they can bring not only extreme heat, but prolonged heat. We talked about this in the past couple of episodes, I believe, the podcast. We were tracking some of the extreme heat down in the desert Southwest. I have some unbelievable stats to share with you. So let's talk about things that happened in the United States. We'll kind of pepper in some stats that happened globally. So we'll start off with July 16th. Death Valley hit 128 degrees. Death Valley hits, 120 plus degree heat essentially almost every summer. It's part of Death Valley is below sea level. It's an extreme area. So in terms of heat, it is. So it's not totally unusual, but that was 2 degrees off of the most reliable temperature record recorded there. Now, the WMO has the hottest temperature ever recorded at 134, but that's debated by a lot of climate scientists. So many believe that it is 130 degrees. So we'll just assume that it's 130, but the record says 134. It was awfully close to that. A small town in northwest China recorded its hottest temperature ever for the entire country of China at 126 degrees.
Wow.
You guys want to hear some pretty amazing stats in Phoenix, Arizona?
Yes.
Phoenix went from June 30th to July 30th, 31 straight days, with highs at and above 115 degrees. Phoenix has now recorded more 115 plus degree days than it has ever seen in a year, and they all came in July, I believe.
Totally wild.
It wasn't just 110 plus; it was a lot of 115 plus degree heat. So get this, they went 16 days in a row in Phoenix with overnight lows at and above 90 degrees. And one of those was an all-time record warm low, so a record warm night with a low of 97 degrees. So this is putting major stress on a lot of the wildlife, but there are reports of the cacti in Arizona that are highly stressed because of the heat, the prolonged heat out there. And this isn't just Phoenix; it's other parts of the desert Southwest, the Great Basin, and that extends into the Southern Plains and out into the Southeast. In fact, Florida experienced its warmest July on record. Much of the ocean around Florida, the sea surface temperatures are in the 90s. For the record,
crazy.
You only need sea surface temperatures at about 80 degrees or higher for hurricanes to strengthen in. So this is bathwater out there. And there's a part of near southern Florida, I believe, it's a buoy south of Manatee Bay. So that's south of Miami. This was back on July 31st, I believe. They recorded a sea surface temperature of 101 degrees, which is like scorching heat. The water there, it tends to get warmer in that part of, off the coast of southern Florida, because from what I understand, the sand is darker, so it absorbs more heat.
Oh,
but
that makes sense.
Guys, there's a lot of coral around that part of Florida, or in that part of the ocean, and there's some really intense chloral bleaching going on. So they're seeing the chloral dying out there, and that's a essential part of our food chain. So that's a really alarming thing to see. So pretty extreme heat down in the Southeast. Parts of South America right now, basically between the end of July and early August, have been experiencing an extreme winter heat wave. So parts of Chile and Argentina, from what I understand, have seen record temperatures. August is like equivalent to February in the Southern Hemisphere. And parts of the foothills of the Andes have seen temperatures spike above 100 degrees. There are many major cities in South America that have seen record temperatures. But to hear about 100 plus degree heat in what would be equivalent to February is pretty extreme. I actually looked at the hottest temperature ever recorded in Death Valley in February is 98 degrees. So, and Death Valley is below sea level, from what I understand. And this is at elevations of 3,000 to 4,000 feet in the Andes. So pretty extreme heat down there. Let's transition to Portland and Salem and some other cities, and then we'll talk about normals. I want you guys to kind of bring it back home and get our viewers to recognize what we can typically understand is what a normal August is. So in July, Portland experienced its sixth warmest July when you average the highs and lows together. You guys, we talked about how the heat dome has been basically centered over the desert Southwest. We've been on the edge of it for most of the past month and a half. So it wasn't our most extreme July. Salem recorded its 10th warmest July. Most major cities here in the Northwest did not see their most extreme heat in July. But, I mean, PDX had 7 days in the 90s, one at 98 degrees. Salem had 8 days in the 90s, two at 98 degrees, I believe. So we had some pretty decent heat up here as well. But we've managed to stay away from triple-digit heat so far.
Yeah,
that's been huge.
It's been a win, I would say.
Yeah.
And then the times that we've hit the 90s here, it hasn't been like a week or two. It's only been a couple of days, and then we're back to something more reasonable.
Yeah.
Which is very nice.
It feels like more, and we call that kind of like a progressive pattern where we don't have the same system sit over us for long stretches of time. Unfortunately, that hasn't been the case down south, but yeah, we're in the midst of a little heat wave right now as well. Guys, do you have the stats so far in this heat wave and so far in August? Maybe we can kind of go over that. Some folks will tune in a little bit later than when we previously recorded this. So let's go over that, and then we'll talk about the normals for August.
Sure. Who wants to take, do you want me to take that, Katie, since I did the forecast here?
Yeah. I have the normals for August, so I'll take that one.
Yeah, so, we did hit 90 degrees yesterday, which would have been Wednesday in Portland, and we're thinking that's going to be the case today. At last check, we were in the mid-80s, right? Is that what we talked about just a little bit ago? Yep, 85 just before 3 p.m. So, that's possible, upper 80s to 90 degrees. And then we've got 3 more days in our 7-day forecast here, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. where we're going to be in the low 90s and overnight lows in the kind of low to mid 60s. So definitely warmer than average, but it's nice to see that, we're still cooling quickly at night, getting comfortable pretty quickly in the evening. And then it looks like Monday, Tuesday, we've got kind of a weak, system coming through, bringing us more cloud cover, and we'll be back down into the 80s. Looks like Monday, which was kind of a new development because initially
I was just about to ask that.
Yeah, it looked like Monday could be our warmest day, but that ridge is really retreating a lot more quickly than what models were initially putting out, right, Jeff?
Yeah, I noticed that. So model runs yesterday were hinting at Monday possibly being the warmest day, but
yeah,
things can change pretty quickly given our proximity to the ocean. And as soon as that ocean air starts to pour in, it can change. So yeah, I noticed the overnight runs came in a little bit cooler for Monday, which is nice. We'll get a little relief for a few days. And before we kind of get into the long range expectations, long range forecast, Katie, we're in the first few days of August. August, from what I understand, is one of the warmest months that we have here in the Northwest.
Yeah.
So why don't you go over, what we usually see at the beginning, end of August, precipitation, expectations, things like that.
Yeah. So August is our warmest and second driest month. So we typically start off as we'd see the end of July and into the first week or two of August, we're at 84. So that's our seasonal high temperature. And then as we get through the middle of August, we start backing back off and getting back into the lower 80s. And then we end the month on the 31st at 80 degrees. So we stay in the 80s, but we do see that backing off. And as far as the rains go, typically, this is our last meteorological summer month, even though, we just kind of start looking at different things we do a little different in the fall, but we get just a little more than a half inch of rain in July. It's usually a half inch. So last month we only had 2 days of trace amounts, and going into the month, obviously we haven't had anything yet, which means we're at 44 counting today.
Yep.
I think today would be 45 if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, as of yesterday, 45. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so we're right in that range. And so what I was looking ahead on is if we continue with the 7-day dry streak, that'll bring us right up to just below being in the top 5 longest dry streaks that there is. I believe 55 days is the number 5 position. Yeah. So if we continue into August as it looks with no precipitation, then we'll get into that top 5. Our wettest August on record was back in 1968, and we hit just a little more than 4.5 inches. And then the driest was last year, and we just had a trace, and that was in 2022. So the hottest afternoon we've had was 107, and the warmest night was 73. So with the low to mid 60s that we're looking at right now, we're not looking at hitting that record, fortunately.
So we, under the right circumstances, under the right weather pattern, we can see some pretty extreme heat in the month of August. And I think a lot of Northwesterners have thought of August as, that's a month we get pretty hot in.
For sure.
And going back to that dry streak, not including a trace amount, we're talking about measurable rain. So our dry streak's at 44, probably going to be 45 by the end of the day today. That's 45 days in a row at PDX. We haven't recorded measurable rain. I believe 51 days would pop us up into the top 10. So Katie was mentioning the top 5. We have a graphic that shows that, and we'll probably keep on updating that. And it's kind of an important thing that we're tracking. I know we tend to focus in on Portland, but that's our most populated city locally here. But the entire Northwest is very dry. We had our first heat wave in mid-May, and we had a few instances of rain here and there since then, but we've been pretty dry and pretty warm consistently. And, warmer days than normal bring more evaporation, and it sucks a lot of the moisture out of the vegetation. So, Camila, yesterday we were under a fire weather watch, and then during your guys' shift, it was upgraded to a red flag warning. Can you talk about that and why this red flag warning is in place and where it's located?
Yeah, so it's really for most of central and eastern Oregon. Really, the only exception is kind of along the gorge, like northern portion of the state. But pretty much all of central and eastern Oregon under that red flag warning kicked off this morning and it doesn't expire until Friday night. And yeah, like you mentioned, Jeff, things are just super dry out there. We're seeing that breeze kicking up in the afternoon, so it gets gusty. And then on top of that, we're throwing in some isolated thunderstorms. We're already seeing some. I just checked the radar maybe 15, 20 minutes ago, and I'm seeing flashes of lightning kind of trekking north between Burns and Pendleton. So, if you get a lightning strike, that's a new fire start, or could be a new fire start, and things could definitely spread rapidly. So that's why the National Weather Service upgraded that fire weather watch.
Yeah,
And I want to throw something in there real quick.
Mm-hmm.
So just because I've been tracking drought status in Central Oregon for a very long time, one thing to say on a positive note about this is if you look at that drought map, so they're in severe, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But since I've been a weather geek and since I've been tracking weather, they have been an exceptional and extreme. So because of what we did have over the winter and the extra stuff that we got, even though this is all very important and watching it, their drought level is the lowest it has been since I've been paying attention to it. Yeah. So just wanted to put a little side note on that is it's actually better than it has been in a very long time.
Yeah.
The drought status, at least.
We did see some big improvements just in general in the Northwest from our very wet and snowy winter that we had. That being said, this is the driest time of year essentially. So these lightning strikes. Now I will say, from what I've seen from computer model runs, high resolution runs, eventually some of these thunderstorms will look like they're going to be pretty juicy. So I don't think we're going to have these huge instances or examples of dry lightning. Dry lightning is when you don't have a lot of precipitation falling from a thunderstorm, and that can lead to a fire start. But that being said, I think that we could see some new fire starts because we're going to go for a 48-hour period with waves of monsoonal moisture bringing those isolated to scattered thunderstorms in central and eastern Oregon. So yeah, that red flag warning is bringing awareness about that. It's something that we're going to be watching closely. Obviously, Camila's in the weather center today watching the radar. And we're going to keep an eye on visible and infrared satellite imagery, which can detect some of the new fire starts. So that's something that's going on. And some of those storms may actually lead up into the Cascades as we wrap up the week. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I was just looking at that, and it looks like our best chance of seeing something kind of drifting further west is going to be Saturday afternoon. That's when we could maybe see some things bubbling up in the Cascades, maybe eastern slopes of the Cascades. So something to, keep in mind if you're camping or doing something like that in the mountains this weekend.
That's pretty important stuff too. Yeah, great point. If you're camping this weekend and you're taking a long hike during the afternoon, that tends to be when these thunderstorms like to bubble up and create more of their lightning because they rely on daytime heating. They're usually diurnally driven thunderstorms. So if you see the sky turn dark, and certainly if you hear thunder, you're going to want to take shelter somewhere. That's something that's really important. But you guys, we haven't had any big events, like big offshore wind events this season. And it does tend to be more of a late season thing, like August, September, when we start to get the cooler air masses working their way into the interior Northwest, and that helps to force the wind offshore. But I bring that up because there is already one major fire that's burning. It's been burning since July 22nd in the Cascades. It's east of Eugene and west of Bend. Both of you were mentioning this before we started the podcast, that you had checked some of the stats. So let's talk about that fire. We'll mention the flat fire down to the southwest of that. But Katie, or
I'll go for that one just because I've tracked fires in Central Oregon for a long time. So I feel like I can speak to this one. So basically where that fire is sitting. So for those of you that don't know, the change in elevation in Central Oregon actually goes from the southwest to the northeast. So anywhere that's in La Pine or anywhere in that area, that is the highest elevation in Central Oregon. And then it drops as you go down toward Warm Springs and Madras. And then the same thing when you're in Sisters, you're actually a lower elevation than Bend, but that also has a drop as you go down toward Prineville. So you get a lot of that downslope wind when you come over the Cascades in that direction. So that's typically where whenever there is a red flag warning, a fire weather warning, a winter weather watch, it kind of swings from the backside of Sisters down around the south side of Bend, kind of down the Deschutes River Woods area, and then curves off into the east. So that is almost always the area that has, if it's going to be one part of Central Oregon, that's where it is. And that's exactly where the smoke is coming from. So if you look at all the maps and you look at that northwest wind coming in and how it catches things, how things are funneled, all of that is just basically being channeled pretty much to La Pine right now. And then when the winds die down, everything starts to settle, and then it settles down and drops into Bend, and then everything in that area starts to get it. The main times that we can get smoke in that upper areas, like around Warm Springs and Redmond and stuff, is when you get, there's the fire that's burning, and I don't remember what it's called because it's kind of an interesting name, but it's up near Warm Springs.
Let me back up really quick. Let me back up really quick, Katie, for everybody that's curious. Katie's kind of talking about the terrain in Central Oregon. Just to back up for a second, the Bedrock Fire is burning east of Eugene, west of Bend, up in the Willamette National Forest.
That's where
it's up in the higher elevations. And Katie's describing that this fire that's been burning since July 22nd has primarily been pushing smoke off to the east into some of those valleys down in Central Oregon. Because of that
terrain, the way So that's why most of that smoke hasn't really drifted much up past Bend. It's the one that's a little more north of Bend, that's near the Bed, or near Warm Springs and Madras, that little one up there. That's the one that's given like Mount Hood the hazy skies and things like that. We've seen.
Yeah, and I will say though, predominantly the Bedrock Fire has been the big smoke maker in the past week or so, and it continues to be today. And
well, it grew 1,000 since yesterday, so it's at 12,200 acres right now, just at 5% containment.
Yeah, so that's a fire that's pretty out of control and tough terrain to attack for firefighters. Again, west of Bend, east of Eugene, it's in eastern Lane County, and there are currently air quality advisories posted for Deschutes County, Lake, and Klamath County counties. Correct? Yeah. So that's a significant fire that is something to watch, because again, our dominant wind pattern is onshore. Remember, onshore wind is from sea to land. So that tries, every afternoon when that wind picks up, that essentially a sea breeze, it pushes the smoke off to the east. So that's why a lot of central and south central Oregon have had air quality issues the past couple weeks or so. But we hope that we don't have much of an offshore wind event anytime soon, because if we do, then more population zones west of the Cascades would probably get some smoke from that fire, and that tends to bring a drier air, et cetera. It's not an offshore wind opposite of the onshore is not what we want to see when fires are burning in the Cascades. And we go back to the fact that, we have a chance for isolated thunderstorms in the Cascades heading into the weekend. Let's hope that we don't have any new fire starts, because I don't see any, big relief from the heat and the dry conditions coming soon. We just wanted to quickly make mention of the Flat Fire that I don't have the stat on me, but that fire broke out earlier. If you guys mind checking.
Right here. Yep. I have it right here. It's at 29.3. So 29,300 and at 28% containment.
Do you have the stat of when it broke out though?
The 15th of July.
Okay, so that's been burning in the Rogue River Siskiyou National Forest. That's way down in southwest Oregon, extreme southwest Oregon, the corner of the state. That's been burning since the middle of July, and that's a large that has burned more acreage so far than the Bedrock Fire that we were previously mentioning, and that's at 28% containment. So they've created a perimeter of 28% around that fire. So those are the two big fires right now. And now that we've mentioned, the chance for isolated thunderstorms, the higher fire danger east of the Cascades, it's probably important to mention as well that some of the computer models that we've been tracking and their ensembles, which are kind of averages, they tweak the model, 50 or so times and, pump out averages to give you an idea of what could happen in the long range. We are seeing some indications that around the second weekend of August, so we're wrapping up, and heading into the first weekend of August. Now, the second weekend of August, this is kind of looking out ahead. There could be an even stronger ridge of high pressure building along the West Coast. And I just wanted to, as a team, we want to give you your first alert that it's possible that we could be looking at hotter temperatures, a more extreme heat wave than what we're experiencing right now. Instead of highs in the low to mid 90s, perhaps we could see our first triple digit heat it's tough to determine exactly how hot it could get around the middle of the month. I think starting maybe 11th, 12th and lasting for maybe 5 days or so. But I just want everybody to be aware that when this heat wraps up and we head into the 80s around, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we may not be done. We may see things ramp up again. And this could, if there are any new fire starts from, the lightning that we're observing, that could invigorate some of the fires out there. Intense heat brings more unstable air, and that's what we don't want to see for fires. So just wanted to put that on everybody's radar. It's something that we'll let you know if we see, continuing in the outlooks. But we are, it is the warmest time of year, guys. But the atmosphere kind of works like if you were to put a pot of water on the stove and turn on the stove. The pot of water doesn't start boiling right away. You might be applying the most heat, say like around the summer solstice when the sunlight is most intense and the daylight hours are longest. But it takes a little while for the atmosphere to respond. So the summer solstice, the longest day of the year in daylight hours, happens around June 21st. But our most extreme temperatures or the warmest time of year happens in late July and early August. Because again, the atmosphere takes some time to respond, kind of like a pot of water. Camilla, you're tracking some of the sunrises and sunsets. We are clearly starting to see the daylight hours shrink up, even though we are in the warmest time of year. So tell our friends at home and listening elsewhere, today is August 3rd.
Yep.
So give some stats and where we're at in terms of sunrises and sunsets.
Yeah, so this morning's sunrise, 5:56, and our sunset this evening, again, August 3rd, 8:36. So we only have 2 more sunrises before 6 a.m. Starting on August 6th, that's our first 6 a.m. Sunrise. And then as far as sunsets go, Johnny, my husband, is very happy about this because he goes to bed at about 8:30 and, it's still light out, or it has been. So he's excited that those are getting earlier. So we hit August 7th, and that's our first 8:30 p.m. sunsets. And then let's see, our first 8 p.m. sunset is going to be around the 25th, 26th, and then we get to before 8 p.m. sunsets. So yeah, I don't know how he falls asleep as early as he does. I'm going to be honest.
Well, I was going to say, I never appreciated it. I used to love the sun staying up as long as possible. But now that I'm on GDO on the weekends, I'm like, would you just set already? I want to go to bed.
Right.
Well,
totally.
Katie and I work the mornings. I mean, I work 5 days a week on the mornings. So I'm kind of like, okay, I'm kind of dragging it in the afternoons. But something that you're probably noticing, Katie, is that with the sunrise occurring a little bit later, we're starting to change our camera view a little bit of the sunrise, getting those time lapses. We now have Mount Hood in those sunrises as well with that Shriners Camp. So things are kind of, they're tilting a little bit more and more toward fall, even though it does not feel like it. It doesn't look like it in the long range and the current 7-day forecast. But I know there are like two types of people in the Pacific Northwest. One that are like totally dreading the thought of fall, right? They just want these warm and sunny days to continue, while others are like, bring on the rain.
For sure.
Where do you guys fall in that category?
Yeah, which one are you, Katie?
So I am a beach girl. I love to go to the beach, so I'm totally happy with it. But if I had to pick one, the fall with a latte, a scarf, and my boots, where it's like, it's not freezing cold, so you don't need like a super heavy winter jacket. But I'm sorry, I'm a pumpkin spice latte gal. So give me my PSL, give me a scarf and my boots. And I am so happy because I love, and this was one of my favorite things of Central Oregon, where you get up in the morning and it's crisp and it's cool. And then you get to the afternoon and the sun comes out, but it's like 75.
Yeah.
That's like my perfect day.
Yeah. That's fair. I feel like if I were still living in the Midwest, I would 100% say the same thing, like fall or spring all the way. But ever since moving to the Pacific Northwest and experiencing summers out here, I'll like, even if it's whatever days in the upper 80s, like the fact that it cools down so quickly at night and the mornings are still crisp. Give me the sunny summer weather all day long. Yeah.
The summers here are just magical. I completely agree with you. That.
They are, toward the middle to end of summer, I'm usually like, let's bring on the fall. I'm about ready. But then as soon as we hit about, March, April, May, I'm like, I'm ready for some sunshine. As soon as that sun comes out, like in spring, I feel like a moth like
Totally.
attracted to the street light. I'm like, oh my
Yes.
gosh, like give me all of it. Even on like our computer monitors or our like TV monitors, when I see the sun rising, I'm like, yeah, that's nice. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. But I know, again, everybody has their own opinion, and every time that we say, oh yeah, this many days until fall, or this is where the sunrise and sunset is, we do offend some people. Jokingly, yeah, people do complain.
Not intentionally though. Okay.
No, of course not. Okay, so we are kind of like toward the end of the podcast here. I did want to sneak in our weather term of the week because this has been fun. This has been a great thing. That and Katie was kind of nudging us a few weeks back, like let's get this started. So we are doing it, and so we've gone over inversion, wind shear. This week's weather term of the week is the sea breeze. So kind of wanted to find the sea breeze for you.
Oh, yeah.
And then we'll kind of talk about it scientifically. So the sea breeze, it's an onshore breeze. So remember, that's from land or from sea to land. It's an onshore breeze in any wind that blows from a large body of water like the ocean toward a landmass. It develops due to a difference in air pressure created by differing heat capacities of water in dry land. As such, sea breezes are more localized than prevailing wind. So the way I like to think about a sea breeze, guys, is have you ever watched a hot air balloon rise, or perhaps have you ever been in a hot air balloon?
Yep.
Okay, so
not in one, but watched them.
Same. Yeah, I haven't been in one either. I do want to get in one someday, but
same.
A hot air balloon rises because they apply heat, right, to the balloon. If you've ever lived or been in a 2-story house in summertime and the AC isn't cranked up, you walk upstairs, it's always warmer up there because that warm air is more buoyant. It wants to rise to the highest place in the house or the atmosphere. So if you think about the coast, typically it's cool. If you think about areas inland, they're warm or hot. So that air rises during the late morning and afternoon. And something needs to fill the gap. The molecules are rising. Something needs to fill that gap. So what happens is the air starts rushing inland. And that air, as it rushes inland, we feel that as that sea breeze. The wind picks up. It initially is felt at the coast, mid to late morning, it starts to get breezy. Then afternoon, it can get really breezy and gusty. And that air rushes in, and eventually we feel that, 4 to 5, 6 o'clock or so in our western valleys. And then it funnels through the gorge, and almost every day, like clockwork out toward the Dalles, we have that gusty westerly wind, right? So that's the sea breeze essentially. And that's like, it's a very typical summer pattern, but it's just a response to the diurnal cycle, the way that, the sun warms the land warms up faster than the ocean. And then you're probably wondering, okay, what does this have to do with the coast? Well, the coast every day, almost every day, it's in the 60s and 70s, right? Well, that's because where's the wind coming from? It's coming from offshore. It's moving over that cool Pacific Ocean, and it moves right over those cities along the coast. So it's always keeping those temperatures more marginal or more mild out there versus areas inland. So, and yeah, the sea breeze happens up and down the West Coast. It happens elsewhere in the world. So this is not just a Pacific Northwest thing. And I'm sure you guys have had experiences with the sea breeze. And I don't know, do you guys have any comments on it?
I am typically doing my bike rides and things in the morning and early afternoon, which works out perfect because that's typically, it's still pretty calm here in the interior valley. So, but yeah, I know if we're getting to a long ride, the end of a long ride, and it's, 4, 5 p.m. on a weekend or something, you start to feel that coming through, especially if one time I remember we were riding in the gorge. You got to be really mindful about which direction you're heading first when you're riding in the gorge. So that's been my experience anyway. It's oh yeah, there it is.
Yeah, that's good. I don't have anything else to add.
I will note when air rises and we don't have as many molecules down at the surface, like inland, like when we have the hot air balloon rising, it creates an area of low pressure. And wind always wants to go toward the area of low pressure. Wind goes from an area of high pressure to an area of low pressure. So naturally that area of low pressure is formed, and we have high pressure over the Pacific Ocean. So it's that difference, that pressure gradient, if you will, that creates that wind. So yeah, we like to pepper in these weather terms. It's becoming a thing here. The weather podcast can be fun, but also we like to educate a little bit as well.
It's fun and nerdy. It's a mix of both.
That's right. And just to end here, guys, I have like a heck of a harvest taking place in the backyard right now. We have cucumbers coming in. My wife has been pickling cucumbers. We have squash. We have tons of tomatoes. Katie, Katie, right here.
Yeah.
Do you need any tomatoes? Like, are you running low at this point, or how's the harvest going over there?
Well, I can tell you right now, as I just came in with a bucket of tomatoes this morning. I went out and grabbed a bunch.
A bucket.
And I walk in. Yeah. And well, I should say bucket. I should say a large container.
Okay.
And I walked in, and my oldest, he's been eating cherry tomatoes off the vine since he was old enough to walk and grab them. And he just took them out of my hand and walked away. So I don't know if I will ever see them again.
So things have been pretty successful back at the Suniga house.
Yeah. I think I might have mentioned this last time. I'm still having a little issue with my zucchini because I don't have enough bees in my backyard. So if your zucchini are not properly pollinated by bees, they grow about 3 inches and then they just die. And so this is one of my test things, is I probably need to bring some more pollinator plants in my backyard when I finally get my garden going next year, to make sure I bring those bees in. Or I was talking with Kimberly Moss about this the other day when I did GDO with Andy, and she's going to buy them and bring them in. And so I might do something.
Like buy bees?
And bring them into her yard, because she's having that problem with her cucumbers. Her cucumbers are popping off like that. So I do need to get some more bees in my backyard so my zucchini can grow.
That's so interesting. How do you ensure that the bees stay local to the area where you want them?
I don't know. She just said she's going to buy them and bring them in.
That makes me, I'm going to Google this. This is really interesting. That's cool.
And so we'll see, but I know one way to ensure it is to put the pollinator plants, to bring those in, and make sure that there's things in there that they're really drawn to. So that's going to be my plan, laying things out, because I've only had a couple zucchini, and I like to use my zoodler. I like to make zucchini chips. I shred it and freeze it for bread in the wintertime. Like, I have all kinds of uses for it, and I haven't had enough zucchini.
Okay, so the plan is, Camila, you Google this bee thing.
I'm on it
out for Katie, so we can get some chips in the building and other tasty snacks. And
yes, I have a dehydrator, so I make my own zucchini chips.
Nice. There you go. And while you do that, I'm going to wrap up this podcast, because Camila's got some shows coming up here in a little while, and Katie's got her day off that she can enjoy the rest of the day of. So thank you for joining us for episode 63. By the way, Mark Nelson is not here. We should have mentioned that earlier.
Where is that man?
He's camping somewhere, I'm sure, but I'm sure he's going to tune in, and he will be back next week. I think I haven't looked at the schedule, but hopefully he's back.
Depends on what day we do it.
Yeah. But thanks for always tuning in, to all the loyal viewers out there, or listeners, depending on how you tune in. And we'll be back next week with updates on the heat and everything related to the weather here in the Northwest. Have a good one. We'll talk to you soon.
Please tell us